Attorney General William Barr has agreed to testify before the House Judiciary Committee next month, appearing for the first time before the panel as questions swirl around about whether he intervened in the case of a longtime ally of President Trump. He should be worried, considering that the legality of what he may or may not have done will be determined by Attorney General William Barr. The Trump Report starts now.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Oh my goodness, can you feel it? Can you feel the Trump Report? Can you feel it swirling all around us? And apparently, some people can feel the burn.
Yes.
Welcome. Somebody can be happy about that. Welcome to the show. Always happy to have everyone here. I'm Christian Blatt, joined as well for the last time, at least as a single woman, Chelsea Galicia.
Yes, hello.
The name will probably still be the same, but there'll be a very heavy piece of
For
jewelry.
the show, at least.
Yes, it was like
For the
her
show.
stage name.
Yeah, yeah. And Scott Moore, you don't go changing.
Never.
All right, good. Very excited to be here. We're here on a Wednesday because we wanted to let the dust clear in New Hampshire, which we could have still done the show at 4 o'clock yesterday, 4 o'clock Pacific yesterday. I think the dust had reasonably settled, but I'm just sort of wondering if we're able to count what we finally got out of Iowa, the Iowa caucus, as reliable, how these first two contests have shaped up in the way that we expected them to. I would say that Bernie, obviously, winning in New Hampshire, finishing very strong in Iowa. Both he and Pete Buttigieg seem to be doing the best in the delegate counts and the best in overall votes. Amy Klobuchar coming on strong. Still never going to be president, but coming on strong. Coming on strong. Maybe Attorney General. Maybe she'll, do a hearing on Bill Barr in a few years. But I'm just sort of wondering what I'll ask each of you. First, Chelsea, your thoughts on the way that this has played out thus far.
I'm delightfully surprised. I mean, I know that I shouldn't have been because, the polls had been showing that this was going to be the result. But, I was a big Bernie girl in 2016. But
way back when. Things were so much simpler back in 2016.
And recently my Bernie fire had sort of been dimming because I thought that we were just hearing the same thing, or what I heard from him in interviews and things was just the same. We need young people to get involved in the political process. I'm like, yeah, we know that. Now, please just start talking about corruption all day, every day. And I thought that he had gone a little too strong on making Medicare for all his number one thing, because I feel like he says it sometimes, but the truth is you can't get it done until the corruption is cleaned up. And I don't even know if you could clean up all the corruption that existed in our democracy before Trump, but has especially been brought to the forefront because of Trump, could be cleaned up in one administration. I feel like the Medicare for all, doing anything like healthcare might be like a second term thing, because there's so much to clean up first. But anyways, his message, I guess, is still burning strong amongst people, and I'm glad that he has picked up the momentum. Maybe they picked up some of my momentum that I lost for him, and because I've been kind of back and forth between him and Elizabeth Warren. And what I liked about Elizabeth Warren is that people like me and Drexel, who was on the show last week, he's much more moderate than I am, that we both would be happy with her. And so I really thought that the losing of momentum that Elizabeth Warren was experiencing was short term and was going to turn around. Maybe it still will. But I'm bummed for her the way that things have turned out thus far. I'm sure that she'll finish stronger by the end. But I read something today that said, and I don't know what modern time limits us to, but that no candidate in modern time has ever won Iowa and New Hampshire and not gone on to be the nominee. So I would be thrilled with that.
So you're working under the assumption that Bernie Sanders won Iowa?
Yes.
Okay, because I think doesn't the delegate count say otherwise? I'm just saying, doesn't it say that? I'm just pointing at what the facts that I believe to have been on record.
I think it's...
And also, we don't trust any of these numbers out of Iowa, in all honesty.
That's true. But what I think what I care more about than the delegates is the momentum that's built, because
Sure.
I think that there is a strong case, because Bernie won the popular vote in Iowa.
Yeah.
There's a good case to be made that he won it. That momentum took him to New Hampshire. He won that. Nobody's arguing about that result that I know of. And I think he'll keep it up.
Yeah, Scott, what do you think before we dive into it a little bit further? What do you think about the way that, what we've seen specifically for Sanders and Mayor Pete?
Well, I think my biggest takeaway is that I was surprised overall by how Biden has really just dropped like a rock. I mean, I think that was the surprising thing. But like you were saying...
It's like a corn pop that didn't pop,
But like Chelsea was saying, he does have the momentum. Bernie has the momentum now, and he did win the popular vote in Iowa. If you were to extrapolate a little deeper, though, you could see there's a little more issues than 2016, where he won huge numbers again. Granted, it was only him and Hillary Clinton in 2016, as essentially running in the Democratic primary at that point. But when you see Mayor Pete and you see Amy Klobuchar, how well she did yesterday in New Hampshire, which I have some friends and family still in New Hampshire, and they said it wasn't surprising. They saw a lot of people that were very interested in voting for her, and a lot of people said that Friday night debate, which was surprising to me because I didn't even watch it. I wasn't in town.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, I was just like, well, we're not doing a show for a few days.
Yeah.
Like I just can't, I needed to sit one out. But I just couldn't see them all make the same point. And it's
exactly,
just, it's part of it's the questions presented. But it's like I'm like I've seen that debate without even seeing it.
But it was interesting. I guess a lot of New Hampshire voters did, because it was the last time they were going to see everybody before the primary. And a lot of people actually made up their mind on Friday that were still unsure to vote for Amy. And so seeing how close it was between her and Pete, and seeing that, it was 24%, 20% for Amy Klobuchar, you see that was a big chunk of the electorate that voted in that moderate lane that is a lot bigger than Bernie Sanders. And he barely eked out a win when you really look at it. And he did worse in some of the areas that he did really well in 2016. You saw that some votes were peeled away for Mayor Pete, especially in southern New Hampshire, compared to 4 years ago. So there's interesting things to take away from it. And then the big picture is we're going from very white, small population states, and the demographics are going to shift by the end of the month when we get to Nevada and South Carolina. And that's where we're going to see who does have the momentum. And obviously March 3rd, we have 14 states voting, including big population states like here in California and Texas. And at that point, we're really going to have a very solid idea of where this race is going. But I think it's hard to really, really read the tea leaves right now. But I do think Bernie has momentum. But overall, who's going to get there by the end, it's still sort of very open for... Really,
well, I found it very interesting what Chelsea was saying, sort of about that you maybe still feel a little bit of a burn, but it's not as white hot as it was 4 years ago. Because the interesting thing is, yes, he obviously there was just the two of them running in 2016, but the turnout is much higher, and overall he did get less votes. And yes, there's other choices, there's a lot of reasons, but you do wonder if it's people are like, oh yeah, no, I still like Bernie, but maybe you're not feeling it the way you did. But then if you see the momentum, I think that a lot of people are like, well, I don't, I think that maybe people just had to be convinced that he could actually win in some of these primaries when, obviously it seemed like that would not be what the party actually wanted is Bernie. And you get the impression that that's never really what they want. So there are a few, but so I would say that, look, however you want to look at it, it's been a great week plus for Mayor Pete and Bernie, and Bernie, far less surprising. I just would have expected, I would expect Mayor Pete to do well, but I didn't think that, he would be second or first in the delegate count or, any of that. Right. I thought that you would have at least Biden, but probably Biden and Warren ahead of him.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because, look, I felt like before the primary season started, we probably could have, had some guesses as to what was going to happen. Now, the interesting thing is, there's that small town that always gets to vote first.
Dixonville.
Yeah. And they have very few, it's like they have like 10, but like 3 or 4 of their votes were all write-ins for Mike Bloomberg. So I found that to actually be very interesting, because, I mean, he probably bought each of those. I don't mean literally, but just for advertising. And I'm like, we got those 4 votes in that town. So I wonder what that translates to. But when you have as much money as him, it doesn't matter. Right. I think that whether or not he's viable to become the nominee, when debates start including him in it, it'll be more interesting because he hasn't been in them yet. Right. But as of right now, he has not qualified for the next debate, nor has Tulsi Gabbard, who is still running, by the way.
Right, she is.
Yes. Whether or not she's being funded by the deep state or the Russian deep state,
I can't even believe.
We don't know, but we don't know who's paying for her to be on the ballot. But she's still out there. But let's pour out $1,000 a month for Andrew Yang. The Yang Gang.
Yeah,
the gang just
sad.
Didn't show up for him.
And I had a lot of Republican friends that were supporting him and had registered Democrats to be able to vote for him
for the Yang Gang
in
Come
California,
on.
and we're very, very sad.
Well, you can still vote for the Yang Gang, I mean, I get it.
He was going to be a delegate. I mean, his whole thing, he was going all in it. And I had another friend in Florida that was going to go all in.
Man.
They were very sad yesterday.
I'd say not surprising. I think that, you saw how he was polling for a long time. And I think it became pretty apparent that he wasn't going to be in this for the long haul. But, a Democratic president could certainly appoint him to any number of great positions. I would like him to be our czar in charge of robots because he's the one leading the charge against robots taking over for all of us.
In the labor department would make a lot of sense.
No, I want him protecting us from robots. However you want to, whatever you want to call that. I think that, and you know what? We already know what to pay him. You give him $1,000 a month. Everybody wins. We have some speeches that. I would like to play. The first thing I would like to play is from Elizabeth Warren. This is from last night. And there's a few things to play, but I just need to hear a little bit of this. And I think that we might need to vamp a little bit because I think that there might be an ad as this starts to play. But I think that, certainly a disappointing finish for Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. But at the same time, it's not shocking, it's not
a little to me, even though we saw it
people in the Biden campaign. I can understand them being surprised, and we'll talk about him in a minute. So let's hear this is what she had to say last night in New Hampshire, and we only need about 20 seconds.
So the results are still coming in from across the state, but right now it is clear that Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg had strong nights. And I also want to congratulate my friend and colleague, Amy Klobuchar, for showing just how wrong the pundits can be when they count a woman out.
Okay, you can go ahead and pause that right there. So no one was counting a woman out. They were just counting out that woman. Elizabeth Warren is the one that people are saying can't win.
Amy Klobuchar had been counted out.
Yes, she had
too.
been.
Well, I definitely would be surprised and am surprised that she got more votes than Elizabeth Warren. And I know, I mean, there's something, I honestly, I think it just comes down to likability. And I mean, you can say what you want about Elizabeth Warren, but when she's, awkwardly posting videos with her husband, acting surprised that he came into the kitchen when, he lives there. There's just a lot of things. It's like you don't see a lot. Like, pretending to be human is not her strong suit. No, look, it's not in her programming. And she's one of the robots that Andrew Yang is warning us about.
Oh, Jesus.
No, but I think that it might just be that simple.
That
it's
made
less
you
about
dislike her?
No, I mean, it's the haircut. I mean, if anything. No, I mean, I don't think I much care for her policies, but I'm talking about the likability for people. I'm talking about like people see her and they go like, I'm not really feeling it. But then something about Klobuchar with her jokes that don't really go over, but she keeps trying to bring them out again. And it's
That's charming.
To some people, they're like, I felt like that.
Well,
I'm going to go ahead and give her a vote.
Well, I'm not saying that that's the reason why they voted for her, but there is that relatability of like she's the everyday, regular person. But I am surprised that Elizabeth Warren didn't do better in New Hampshire just because of the fact that she's the neighboring senator in Massachusetts, and a lot of people that live in southern New Hampshire, their media markets are in Boston and everything. So you get a lot of Elizabeth Warren and what she's doing in Massachusetts. And so I would have thought that a lot of times that next door neighbor, like Bernie Sanders in Vermont,
I was
that
going
would
to
have
say that
translated
they had too many
more
neighbors. Yeah.
because people know who she is already. It's not like they have to get to know her. And I was surprised that she did not get more votes just because of the fact that people didn't have to get to know her better, and that she didn't pick up more.
Minnesota's
from
closer to Iowa, and so
No, I'm talking about New Hampshire.
I know, but you would have thought. I mean, if you think the next door neighbor thing helps, then that should have helped Klobuchar.
It should have, and I was surprised by that too. But even more so, New Hampshire, because of the fact that their media market is right there. The biggest population in New Hampshire lives right on that Massachusetts border.
Sure.
And they get the Boston
Sure,
markets.
like you knew that. I had no idea.
I do know that. Well, yeah, no, I mean, honestly, there's also a big part of Massachusetts that their big market is Albany, New York. I know this part of. I'm
Western
from.
Mass,
I'm from.
yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
I'm learning so
I'm
much
from
here.
that corner. Yeah.
So I would have thought, if anything, that would have translated even more than Amy Klobuchar. But yes, I agree with you. It should have helped her a little bit more in Iowa as well, which I was surprised that she didn't do as well there either. So it's very fascinating now that doesn't translate, because that used to translate a lot for people when they're running for president. Is they're like, great, it used to be like, oh, we're going to pick a vice presidential candidate, we're going to pick someone depending on what state they're from, because that state will go for them. And we've seen now in the past 10 15 years that it doesn't hold true anymore. You can be from whatever state, and it doesn't mean that the candidate is going to win. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean as much as it used to mean, and so it was very interesting to see that.
Well, if there's a question about Elizabeth Warren's likability factor heading into the New Hampshire primary, there are a lot of questions about someone else's likability factor heading out of the New Hampshire primary. There's 2 more videos in there that I would like to see.
We're talking about likability with Donald Trump as president.
A lot of people like him,
But is his likability factor high? Like if you measure that?
They love him. They don't just like him. There are 2 clips of Vice President Biden, and I think neither one of them has an ad beforehand. It actually doesn't matter which one. Just answering some tough questions about how he was basically a roadrunner cloud out of the state.
Joe, why'd you decide to leave early?
I'm not leaving early.
Why'd you skip the party tonight?
I'm going down to South Carolina, and then I'm going to be
I'm not leaving early.
My deal. And why are you so negative?
I'm just wondering.
Yeah. Why are you so negative? That's not so bad. It's the next one, though, that, he's angry. It's like, I'm not leaving early as he's on the
Getting on
runway,
the plane.
leaving
Yeah.
early, like long before the votes are done being counted.
It's not even dark yet there.
Yeah, exactly. And it gets dark at like 4 o'clock there. Then there's this is just a snippet. It should be queued up right here.
Up on New Hampshire. Don't poke that in my face, okay, buddy? That's all right.
Yeah,
Good.
That's the key there. Is the don't poke that in my face, okay, buddy? So it's like doesn't like the questions that he's being asked because he's being asked tough questions.
Doesn't like things poked in his face. I didn't hear what was the question.
So that
preceded
microphone's
the
not
poking.
that microphone's actually not in his face any more than any of the other ones were. It was just he
We
didn't
worked
like.
hard here. We're continuing. We're going to go all the way to the end. Yeah. And this is it. I'm not concerned about it at all. Does it seem like you're giving up on New Hampshire?
It's actually next to it.
I'm not giving up on New Hampshire. Don't poke that in my face, okay?
I mean, it was poking, but
Okay, so I can't ask about likability, and you're going to define the poke. So
and I'm not one to defend Joe Biden generally.
Old Joe seems to be a little bit rattled. I was never convinced he wanted to run for president. He just kind of let himself get talked into it. And then, there was some bird on his shoulder that told him that he could win. And he's like, all right, this is going to be great. And the idea that he's just been embarrassed over the last 8 days, just how badly he did in both of them. Second place finish in either or both of them, you're like, okay, it's fine.
Right.
There's still plenty of time. And you can point to South Carolina, somewhere he's expecting to do well, Super Tuesday, sure. But this this has to be setting off all kinds of alarms for the Biden camp. If Joe, is actually even really aware of what's going on. He's just like, I'm just getting on a plane. They told me it's time to go, so I must be going somewhere. What do you think, Scott?
No, I do agree. I think thinking that a relatively popular former president and this vice president for a two-term, most recent president, which used to be kind of a shoo-in as well. When you think about, okay, vice presidents usually send to the presidency.
Yeah, Walter Mondale was the VP for an unpopular president, and he still got the nomination.
Right.
He didn't do well. Did not do well. Lost 49 states, but
right.
still, he got the nomination.
But so it's surprising, I think, again, how badly he's done in the first two states. I would have thought at least second or third.
Third, you can walk off third, but fifth,
fourth and fifth.
Here's the thing. I think some people are coming around to see Obama was very likable.
Mm-hmm. Sure,
but he didn't get things done. You can say the Obamacare, he got that done. And I mean, you can even say, but he was stifled by the fact that he lost control or didn't have control of the House and Senate in a second term. But the thing is, he didn't go after the problems that underlay all the other problems, and people are starting to figure that out. I think because Bernie and Elizabeth have been saying it enough, it's because of the corruption. If we just keep going the status quo, we're just going to keep getting the same thing. People now see that somebody like, Obama wasn't that interested in going after it. Biden doesn't say anything about going after it. Instead, when talking about insurance companies, like, we'll deal with them.
Yeah.
No, you're not going to deal with them. He just doesn't get it. So what I'm hoping this means is that more people are recognizing that the problem isn't just a level-headed, nice guy who, presents well and has really impassioned speeches, like Obama had. But we need somebody who really identifies the problem. And the problem is the corruption that right now our democracy is barely, it's like floating on it. The swamp is getting swampier. And because
I was under the impression it was being drained.
Oh,
gradually. No, it hasn't been?
I
haven't paid attention.
I think Joe Biden refuses to see that is the problem that we have right now. I think that's
I think that can certainly be a part of it. What do you think, Scott?
Well, and I also think that people have also seen him and on a more surface level, not even with the corruption, but I think just in general, like the moderates who are now kind of looking at Amy Klobuchar are looking at him and being like, he's not the same Joe Biden as 2008 or 2012
or even, lost
or even 2019. He might have lost a little since then.
And so I think a lot of people are now looking at him and seeing his gaffes and seeing some of his debates and thinking, maybe he's not
sharp enough.
The one that we need now to carry us through.
And don't forget that none other than Joe Biden himself said that, I don't know if I'm going to make it to a second term, so I better have a really good vice.
Did he say, I don't think I'll make it? Or he's just said, I'm not sure that I'll actually
I wasn't directly quoting it, but that's essentially what he said. It's like, that's why I'm going to need a really strong vice president. And that's almost like, look, I get it, you don't like me, but man, my vice president's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so I think that
he's going to let us have class outside. There's going to be soda in the vending machine, pizza every Thursday and Friday. Anyway, what were you going to say, Scott?
No, so I believe now that people are voting, they're really looking at that, and especially after Iowa, a lot of voters in New Hampshire in that moderate lane were probably thinking, okay, now we're not voting Joe Biden. We're now going to drop our votes for Amy, and that's why I think you saw those numbers were so large. I mean, it was pretty crazy that she got 20% and Mayor Pete got 24%. I mean, it was all right there, which is a big difference from Iowa a week earlier. So I think people are starting to see, and that's why you see his support has dropped steadily even in South Carolina now. And even a lot of black voters are starting to look at Bernie and looking at alternatives, and this really could be the end of the road for him by the end of the month.
This is one of those moments where, because I have been, so wrong so many times, where I want to go back to the day where Amy Klobuchar announced that she was running for president.
In the snow.
And where I was like, she is somebody to watch. I mean, there's a lot of things about her that are very appealing that I wonder if Republicans would even support her. And I have actually been surprised that she hasn't done as well up to this point. So I just for a little, not full pat on the back, like
No,
a
and-
pat on
and-
the shoulder
and-
to like, yeah, I saw something, and even though for months I was totally like looked wrong.
Well,
like, she was
and
just like,
on this show we had a guest, Dr. Christopher
I was just
Metzler.
gonna say,
he
brought
said
that up.
he knew her very well, and was like, people shouldn't sleep on her.
Right.
And I mean, I think, you know, her not doing well is predicated on Joe Biden doing really well. You know, that's a lot of
Yes,
those votes would have
yes,
gone up to the top.
exactly.
But yeah, no, look, people are definitely looking for something else. So obviously there'll be ample time to dissect this in the weeks and months ahead. Just very briefly, I wanted to talk about this idea, though, about whether or not Bernie would be the strongest general election candidate, because he's the easiest to cast with a very, very specific brush that, well, you know that socialism is communism. And then you can just say, like, do you feel like you're doing well right now? And people who might be like, yeah, I do. Well, you know, Bernie's going to want to tax all that money you have coming in. He's going to want to tax everybody. And that is something that will concern people. But it's very easy to pit someone as a communist when you can say, like, and he took his honeymoon in the Soviet Union, you know? So it doesn't help. You know, it's a fairly easy narrative. I mean, I think that Elizabeth Warren has that problem. And then, so there's questions about everybody, but it's almost like Bernie, you think, gets the most support. And we've said that for months on this show, that nobody else has the kind of, you know, fervor for their candidate. I mean, maybe the Yang Gang, but there weren't as many of them. But so I don't know. I find it to be sort of the easiest approach for the Trump reelection campaign. Is like, yes, please give us Bernie. That's the message we're already trying to make about what's wrong with him. You know, his whole argument against Bloomberg is that he's short, which is true, by the way. You know, so it's, you know, there's something to be said for that.
oh, there is.
Yeah, well, I believe that Bloomberg responded, well, at least I'm not fat. So, you know. So, you know, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I missed that.
But Scott, as somebody who has not really felt the burn traditionally, I wanted to ask you first. Well, the burn may come. The burn may, you know, look, it's like how the rhythm is going to get you. The burn might get you. Do you have concerns like that about Bernie, or do you feel that he is just as strong, or maybe even the strongest of these possible candidates in a general election against Trump?
No, of course I have that concern because of the disinformation and the fact that social media sites like Facebook and Twitter are refusing
we're not
to get
dealing with
involved.
facts. Yeah.
So, of course it's a concern, because even when I see friends talk and they're, you know, kind of sussing out the candidates, you get some people that are very passionate about, I am not voting for Bernie if he's the candidate. You get other people like, you got to vote.
Oh, they say that
We-
now.
we-
Yes, and
We've had someone like that on this show as recently as last week.
And you get the back and forth on both sides, and people say, oh, if Bernie doesn't get it, I'm not going to vote. But it's been fascinating as the voting has started to see people's conversations going back and forth, and I do think that's a concern. However, I also look back at 2016 when we all laughed off Donald Trump winning, never thought it was going to happen in a million years, and they're kind of both sides of the coin here of
In
Bernie
some ways.
supporters. No, in the sense of the passionate
The passion and
people
devotion to their candidate, and you've gotten very angry at me when I've said this in the past, but that is the way that they're similar.
Right.
You know, just the
Right.
way they feel about their guy.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, they're that devoted to it.
Yes.
And, you know, Trump said I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and you kind of laugh it off. It's like, that's a weird comment. But now you're like, oh, he totally could shoot someone, and he'll be fine. So
and just walk right back into Trump Tower, and that'll be it. But there is a passion with Bernie voters that is what's in common with Trump voters, and the fact that you will have people that will go out and vote for him no matter what, and there might be a very big youth vote that is the largest vote for him and his supporters that will come out and vote that have not done that in the past, and especially in 2016, you know, they sat out. So I think that it would be very interesting, and I wouldn't say that he would lose, but I would be more concerned about some battleground states. Would he be able to pull off a win in Arizona? Would he be able to pull off a win in North Carolina or Florida or certain states that are...
But
Sure.
isn't it most important, you know, the Pennsylvania, Michigan,
Right,
Wisconsin,
yes.
and that's where he's done well?
No, he's done very well there, and he did very well in 2016 in the primaries there.
See, what
Yeah,
I think,
so.
whether you're right, left, you're pissed off at the way government is going, that this democracy is not responsive to you. So the Republican Party has been broken wide open by Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Arguably for better or worse. But, I mean, the party that he broke was not a great one to begin with. The Democratic Party itself, separate from their ideals and values that they state, the party itself also needs to be broken of its dependency on basically on money also.
No, I agree with you.
And so if this does nothing but to like break open the DNC and the party as a like a come to Jesus moment of like our ways are not going to do it, and which is my biggest concern about Bloomberg being successful, because even though he you know, he could win because he's got such a war chest of I don't know how many tens of billions of dollars.
And buying all those votes, like you were saying earlier. Yeah.
You're beating Trump using the same problem that got Trump elected in the first place. So it's like a Band-Aid, but the Band-Aid is infected with something, and it's going to make the wound worse.
Well, it's hard to make the argument that, like, you know, you feel bad about the way that things are about this. Okay, this guy who claims he's a billionaire running the country. You know what's going to fix that? A different guy who's a billionaire.
Right.
A guy who's got more money is going to be,
from New York and the same big. And again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier with the Bernie supporters, they're similar to Trump supporters, but also Bernie similar to Trump in the sense that they were both outsiders that were not part of the party and not part of the party machinery. And I do agree with you. I think, you know, like 20 years ago, there wasn't as much difference between Republicans and Democrats. They were both big money, you know, a lot of very similar things. And we've seen the parties get separate over the past, you know, since around the year 2000, since the George W. Bush and Al Gore election. They've gotten further and further apart. And so you're seeing more of these candidates now from outside of that, like Trump on the Republican side and Bernie on the Democratic side. And then you're getting those supporters as well. And I think it is important to sort of cleanse the Democrat. I think Tom Perez has to go. I think there's a lot of changes that have to happen in the DNC, but this could be part of that kind of realignment with someone who's sort of from that outside, like Trump on the Republican side, and kind of reshape it for the Democrats. So it will be interesting to see what happens. But I don't believe that it's going to be a landslide re-election for Donald Trump if Bernie Sanders gets in. I just think it would be interesting to see how it all plays out. But yes, they will play ugly.
For the Democratic Party, as much as it will hurt them, it will be the best thing for them. And it's just like that painful ripping off of because you don't want to let go of all the money that's gotten you where you've been to. Yeah. It's like I don't know. It's like being kicked out of the house. It's
always make the
you
point
really don't want to be, but when you are forced to.
If we've said this many times on the show, if there were term limits, at least in the last term, they'd probably do something about it. Now, in however many terms they're allowed to have up until that point, it's like, well, no, I don't want the money to stop flowing in. But then by the end, they're like, all right, let's see if I can do something so that I can have a foundation. I do want to move on from this because we only have about 5 more minutes. So, Scott, we have spent years on this show talking about the impeachment clock.
Years.
I mean, at this point, I think it's played out as far as it's going to. Do we have to just basically unplug the impeachment clock, put it away,
or get it started for Bill Barr?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, or do we put somebody else's name on it?
No, I almost do. Yeah, should we start again for Bill Barr? Yeah. Should we start again for him to do something else again and be impeached? I think I have to hold the clock going.
Or you just keep it there.
11:55. Right. We'll reset it back to 11:55.
Yeah, it got close, but
and then we'll see what happens.
And look, you were right. The impeachment did happen.
Yeah.
It's just there was no removal from office, and
which again has never happened in history, so it was not a surprise. Of course, they try to flip it as such. But
what I want to spend our few minutes on is the post-impeachment Donald Trump, who is. It's a little bit of a regional reference. There was somebody in the New York area who sold electronics, and his name was Crazy Eddie, and he would just yell about how cheap all of his prices were and how they're literally insane because he's Crazy Eddie. And I think Trump's kind of done that because now he's like, you should apologize for what you did to Roger Stone, and people getting fired, and I mean, and a lot of people, and I guess there's arguments about he shouldn't be able to fire them. But I mean, anyone who's an appointee, they always use the phrase that you serve at the privilege of the pleasure of the president. And when the president doesn't like you anymore, for whatever reason, you just get fired.
And your twin brother.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it's twin, so obviously it's like I hate you just as much. But I think that clearly when he's like, all right, well, we got away with that, so now we're going to have, and sort of the thing we're referring to is this 9-year sentence of Bill Barr, where it was just like, oh yeah, we're not going to do that.
Roger Stone.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Bill Barr should.
I might be jumping ahead. I might have read some news from the future.
Yeah.
I can't confirm nor deny. But yes, sorry, Roger Stone. And like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And then we had a number of judges that resigned over that. So prosecutors. Sorry. See, again, looking at the future, Judge Judy might resign over her
when Bloomberg doesn't
endorsement.
win. Yeah.
But so again, we only have a few minutes, so I don't want to get too bogged down in this. But as you look at that, Chelsea, and there have been plenty of alarming things over the last few years, what does that say to you from just the legal standpoint? Just the fact that he and his handlers really seem to be convinced, like, well, we really can do anything now. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to push the envelope even further than we ever thought we could.
Yep. Definitely he's emboldened. I think that as he continues to behave this way and gets even worse, even though he has supporters who will, or ride or die, the Republican Party itself gets more and more trouble because there are enough, I think, still moderate Republicans who might support the president but are like, okay, well, maybe he needs some check on him. I don't want him removed, but I'm not going to be gung-ho for this super Trump supporting senator that's running or that's up for re-election. Maybe we need to tamp down or maybe even go with the Democrat because, I don't want to come out that I'm anti-Trump, but I do think he needs a check on himself. So it's bad for the party, but maybe great for him. And
unfortunately, we'll always have plenty of time to talk about this in the future. But Scott, do you, sort of our final thought here, do you think that it's not surprising when Trump reacts in a way that doesn't seem to make the most sense, but wouldn't it have been smarter to just like, we're going to lay low for a little bit and we're going to take that win,
pretend to learn our lesson,
and look, behind the scenes we can we can scheme and we can connive and do all the things everybody expects, but it's but to be so blatant about it, I was just like, well, I think that's the wrong lesson, even for him, to think that like, we can.
I'm glad you think so,
Christian. I think that goes right into his MO because look, it was the day after he was supposedly exonerated by Mueller that he had the perfect phone call in Ukraine. All I can say is I'm pretty sure, Susan Collins is expressing concern when he cancels the 2024 elections and decides to stay in office indefinitely. I'm sure Republicans will be concerned and say something and that'll be it. And then he'll just be Emperor Trump until, he's gone and then pass it off to his children. So that's the direction we're heading in because if you have a Justice Department in your back pocket and you have a rubber stamp Senate that's Republican that's just going to basically acquit you on anything, that's where you start leading into dangerous areas where then, well, what's the next thing that's going to be that he's going to do? Is it going to say, oh, I don't follow the 22nd Amendment anymore because I don't have to? Who's going to take me out of the White House? Who's going to say he can't cancel elections or say there was fraud? So it is dangerous, and I think people do need to be more concerned about that. And we've got caught up with the election. And the other point I will say about New Hampshire is he got 120,000 votes, which was way higher than any incumbent president ever has gotten. But I'll also say you had 15,000 people that went out in the snow and cold that voted for Bill Weld.
I did think that was interesting that you did have people who actually showed up to make the
yes.
little, the whatever 9% of the vote went to Bill Weld.
So I think that goes back to what you were saying, Chelsea, that Republicans are expressing concern, and those people went out and did a protest vote. And it also showed that with the biggest turnout surpassing 2008 for Democrats, that he will not get New Hampshire anyway. So New Hampshire's a lost cause for him, even with those numbers.
We will talk about all this and more next week, but we will not be able to speak with Chelsea because she'll be off on her wedding. So congratulations to you. We will see you in a few weeks. But if people want to keep tabs on you, where do they find you on social
At
media?
Chelsea Galicia.
And Scott Moore.
You can find me at SMan80.
And you can find me at Christian DMZ. And you can also find me tomorrow night here on AfterBuzz TV at 9 p.m. for the Star Trek Picard After Show. But until then, see you all next time.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.